There are things a CEO expects to see in an operations report: numbers, trends, maybe a few red flags. But a vague note about one worker showing up consistently after hours without explanation wasn't one of them. Darius Miles, founder and CEO of Southpoint Logistics, leaned back in his leather chair, two reports in hand. The first made sense: profits up, output stable, warehouse performance on track. The second, a supplemental file from HR, didn't sit right. No misconduct, no formal complaint, just a quiet note attached to an attendance log that mentioned a temp named Marcus Dean staying late every night. No overtime, no record of extra assignments. Just there. Darius hated this kind of thing, not because it looked serious, but because it was vague. And vague, in his experience, usually meant ignored. He remembered the last time he saw something like this, years ago, when he went undercover and uncovered an abusive manager no one dared report. That experience changed company policy. Now his instincts were flaring again. By the time the sun set, Darius had cleared his calendar, called in a favor with a staffing agency, and created a new identity. Ray Johnson, a temp worker with steel-toed boots and nothing to lose. Just another face on the warehouse floor. The first thing Darius noticed about the night shift at Southpoint's Midtown Fulfillment Center was how sterile it felt. Not cold exactly, just emotionally empty. No chatter, no music, no real energy. Just the constant hum of machinery, the beep of scanners, and the mechanical whir of forklifts rolling across concrete. Workers moved like gears in a system, eyes low, bodies tired, each person locked into their task with little interaction. When he walked in as Ray Johnson, no one looked twice. The night manager, a heavy-set man named Frank with tired eyes and a clipboard tucked under his arm, barely glanced at him. "Zone 6, Frank muttered, thrusting the clipboard forward. "You're with Marcus, receiving doc." Darius gave a nod and followed the map through rows of shelving and stacked pallets until he saw someone working with practiced precision near the far end of the floor. Marcus Dean, mid to late 20s, slim build, wore his safety vest like it was part of his skin. Natural, broken in. His sleeves were rolled up and his movements were fluid, efficient, almost mechanical, but not rushed. Darius approached casually. "Hey, I'm Ray, new guy. Frank said I'd be shadowing you tonight." Marcus barely glanced up, nodded once, then pointed to a pallet. "You ever scan outbound inventory?" "Not really," Darius replied, even though he knew the process backwards. "Cool," Marcus said simply, and that was the extent of the welcome. No small talk, no jokes, no eye contact longer than a second. Marcus walked him through the steps without missing a beat. Scan the barcode, match the lot number, check the seal, load from heaviest to lightest, keep the labels aligned. Every word was clear but clipped. Professional, like someone who had repeated this speech 100 times but never added anything extra. What struck Darius most wasn't Marcus's speed or accuracy, it was the way people reacted or didn't react to him. Other workers nodded politely as he passed, but no one stopped to talk. No one addressed him by name. No one smiled. It was as if Marcus existed in the same space but on a different layer of reality. Visible but not included. Later, during the 15-minute break, most workers drifted toward the vending machines near the loading dock, sipping coffee, laughing in low murmurs, shaking off the weight of the shift. Darius sat on a crate nearby, pretending to scroll his phone, but his attention was elsewhere. Marcus wasn't among them. Instead, he was back near the shelving units, bending to pick up a scrap of shrink wrap someone had left behind. He adjusted a loose caution cone, inspected a dock plate, checked the tread on a pallet jack. All things no one had asked him to do. All things most people ignored. And he did it quietly, like muscle memory, like something he'd done so many times he didn't think twice. After the break, the work resumed. Marcus spoke only when necessary, stayed locked into task, and worked with a kind of silent purpose that felt heavy, intentional. Darius had seen motivated workers before, driven by bonuses, competition, pride, but this wasn't that. Marcus wasn't pushing for attention or chasing metrics. He was performing with the kind of care that people usually save for something personal. By the end of the shift, Darius's arms ached from hauling boxes, But Marcus showed no signs of slowing. When most workers clocked out, Marcus lingered. Darius tied his boots slower than necessary, eyes on Marcus as he grabbed a flashlight and slipped through a side hallway marked "Maintenance Access, Authorized Personnel Only." No hesitation, no looking back. Darius stayed still for a moment, heart picking up. Whatever this was, it wasn't random. And it definitely wasn't nothing. By the third night, Darius couldn't stop watching Marcus. It wasn't just curiosity anymore, it was something deeper, gnawing at the edges of his instincts. There was a rhythm to Marcus's movements that didn't match the rest of the shift, like he was operating on a different schedule entirely. He arrived earlier than anyone else, always in the same black hoodie and work boots, head down, moving with quiet precision. Darius noticed how Marcus knew exactly where the security cameras were, how he naturally adjusted his path to stay just outside their reach, ducking behind shelving units, slipping through blind spots between loading zones. It didn't feel sneaky. It felt learned, like second nature, like someone who had spent a lot of time navigating unnoticed. What was even stranger was what he did with that invisibility. Darius watched him pull out his own set of tools, well-worn, labeled with tape and initials, and fix a loose conveyor belt panel that had been squealing for days. He watched Marcus refill a leaking oil valve on a forklift with no work order, no request, just a glance and silent action. One night, Darius followed him deeper into the warehouse, down a hallway marked for storage overflow, past the usual buzz of activity into a section that felt abandoned. The lighting was dim, flickering slightly, and the air smelled faintly of dust and motor grease. Marcus pushed open a side door, unlocked, unused, and stepped inside. Darius waited a moment before creeping forward. Through the narrow opening, he saw Marcus crouched on the floor, tools spread out like a surgical tray, working on a rusted electrical panel with the kind of care most mechanics reserve for sports cars. Every move was deliberate, every screw replaced with precision. On the inside of the panel door, Darius spotted a handwritten checklist, neat block letters, dated notes, items marked done or TBA. No one had assigned this. No one even knew it existed. Marcus was doing it because he wanted to, or needed to. Darius's heart pounded as he backed away quietly, unsure whether to feel admiration or unease. That night, he waited until Marcus emerged, silently slipping out through a different door and disappearing into the shadows. The next shift, Darius couldn't hold back. During break, he approached Marcus behind the loading dock, away from the others. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, voice low. Marcus stiffened, shoulders tensing as he turned. "Doing what?" he replied, guarded. Darius held his gaze. "Fixing things, staying late, working off the clock. I've seen you." There was a pause, and then something shifted in Marcus's expression, not fear, not guilt, just weariness. He leaned against the wall and exhaled. "2 years ago, my brother worked at a warehouse in Dallas," he began, voice tight. He slipped on a puddle that shouldn't have been there. Safety cone had been missing for weeks. No one reported it. No one cleaned it up. He looked down at his boots, jaw clenched. He fell backward, hit the corner of a steel rack, crushed his spine, paralyzed for life. Darius felt his chest tighten. Marcus continued, quieter now. "They gave my family a settlement and moved on like nothing happened. Said it was an accident. Said he should have been more careful." His eyes lifted again, filled with something raw. "So when I got this job, I decided if I could stop even one thing like that from happening again, maybe I'd sleep better." He pushed off the wall and looked at Darius, not angry, not bitter, just steady. "It's not about credit, it's about not looking away." And with that, he walked back inside, leaving Darius standing alone in the cold, breath fogging in front of him, heart heavier than before. Darius couldn't shake the weight of Marcus's words. Over the next few nights, he arrived earlier, stayed later, and began mapping Marcus's movements like a silent investigator. What he discovered stunned him. Marcus wasn't just reacting to occasional hazards, he had built an entire system behind the scenes. A quiet framework of vigilance that ran parallel to the company's official protocols. It started with small things. Handwritten notes tucked behind equipment panels, dates scribbled in ink near fuse boxes, a pattern to the way tools were returned and cords were coiled, always the same way, always more organized than the rest of the team. Then Darius spotted the real clue. A small metal door behind a row of unused lockers near the far end of the warehouse, slightly ajar, marked janitorial storage. Inside was a space barely 10 feet wide, dimly lit, dusty and forgotten by everyone else. But to Marcus, it was something else entirely. The back wall was lined with binders labeled by month and year. Inside were meticulous logs, inspection notes, photos of hazards, equipment failure patterns, even shift reports copied by hand. Next to the binders was a corkboard filled with safety diagrams, emergency protocols, and a hand-drawn floor map of the entire warehouse. Red dots marked blind spots in the camera system. Yellow dots marked high-risk zones. Blue marked recurring problem areas, leaks, loose bolts, exposed wiring. It was more comprehensive than anything the official safety department had ever produced, and none of it existed in any formal report. Marcus had been tracking everything, alone. Darius stood in the cramped room for nearly 20 minutes, just staring, absorbing the sheer scope of it. Every entry was dated, every checklist had follow-up notes. The handwriting was precise, the structure consistent, the language clear. This wasn't a hobby, it was a system. A shadow network built not for recognition, but for protection. And still, not one person had mentioned it. Not HR, not supervisors, not a single recognition in a staff report or end-of-month highlight. Darius went back through company logs and found the pattern. Months of minor incidents left unresolved, maintenance requests closed without action, safety tickets labeled non-urgent and pushed to the side. He looked up Marcus's name in the internal reward system. Nothing. Not once. No peer nominations, no manager notes, no bonus flag. It was as if he didn't exist. And yet, in that dark supply closet, Darius found the clearest evidence of leadership he'd seen in years. Marcus had created an entire safety command center from scratch, all while working temp shifts in silence. He brought his own tools. He spent his breaks fixing what others ignored. He arrived early not for a paycheck, but for a purpose, and he did it all without speaking a word. Darius felt a deep, aching shame swell in his chest. His company prided itself on innovation, culture, and community. But somewhere along the way, it had become blind to its own people, especially the quiet ones. Marcus hadn't needed praise, he needed someone to notice, to care. And now that Darius had seen it, he couldn't unsee it. The system had failed Marcus's brother. Marcus had refused to let it fail anyone else. While others clocked out and went home, he stayed behind, picking up the broken pieces of a company that thought it had everything under control. Darius knew then that this wasn't just about one worker. It was about a truth buried deep in the concrete floor of every warehouse like his. The best among them often go unseen, not because they lack value, but because they ask for nothing in return. And sometimes it takes stepping into the shadows to finally see who's been holding the walls up all along. The following evening, Darius returned to the warehouse, but this time he didn't wear a hoodie or steel-toe boots. He came through the front doors in a tailored coat, clean-shaven, posture sharp. Whispers spread as he stepped onto the floor, and heads turned, especially Frank, who stiffened at the sight. "Get everyone together," Darius said calmly. Within 15 minutes, the entire night shift team had gathered near the loading dock, temps and full-timers alike, clipboards forgotten, gloves hanging from back pockets, eyes scanning the space in curiosity and confusion. Marcus stood near the back, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Darius stepped forward, no microphone, no elevated platform, just his voice and presence. "You didn't know me as Darius Miles," he began, tone steady but full of weight. "You knew me as Ray. I've been working with you for over a week now." The room stirred with murmurs, disbelief rippling across faces. One worker mouthed, "No way," while another shifted awkwardly. "I came here because something didn't sit right," Darius continued. "The reports looked fine, but I kept seeing one name, quietly mentioned, never directly accused, never clearly praised. And when I followed that name, what I found humbled me." He turned his gaze toward Marcus. "This man has done the work of an entire department without being asked, without being noticed, and without ever asking for a thing in return. He has prevented accidents, repaired equipment, tracked hazards, and created a system that our official safety team never managed to build. Marcus looked uncomfortable as every eye in the warehouse turned to him. "And I need to say this clearly," Darius added, voice tightening. "We failed him. We failed all of you. We created a culture that rewards speed and output, but forgets the people holding the foundation together. And Marcus has been doing that for months, maybe longer." Silence fell, thick and honest. Then slowly, Darius stepped closer to Marcus. "Starting today," he announced, "Marcus Dean is being promoted to Regional Safety Officer. Not just for this site, for the entire Southpoint network. His system will become our new standard." Someone in the back started clapping. At first it was hesitant, then more joined in, and suddenly the entire floor filled with applause. Not polite or corporate, but real, grounded, raw. It wasn't just recognition, it was validation. Marcus didn't smile wide, he didn't throw his arms up, he simply nodded once, because he hadn't done any of this for approval. But for the first time, he was seen. Darius didn't stop there. He outlined 3 immediate reforms. First, an anonymous recognition program, so the quietest contributions could finally be elevated without self-promotion. Second, a real-time safety alert system tied directly to HQ, bypassing layers of approval that often delayed action. And third, a listening protocol. Every manager, including Darius himself, would conduct regular one-on-one sessions with staff. No surveys, no email chains, just real conversations. "We don't get to lead if we don't listen," he said, and the weight of those words seemed to land. The effect was immediate. Over the next few weeks, Southpoint's culture began to shift. Supervisors paused to ask questions instead of bark orders. Workers started leaving notes for the next shift, not because it was required, but because they saw Marcus do it first. A vending machine was restocked with healthier snacks. Someone had finally read the comment cards. A forklift operator taped a handwritten inspection checklist to her vehicle. There were still long hours and heavy lifting, but the mood was different. The hum of machinery no longer drowned out the human voices around it. For the first time, people felt not just managed, but cared for. And it all started because one man refused to look away. 3 months later, Darius returned to the Midtown Fulfillment Center, not undercover, not for an inspection, just to see. From the moment he stepped through the glass entrance, he felt the change. The air buzzed differently now. The walls had been repainted, yes, but that wasn't it. There was laughter near the loading dock, music playing faintly from a Bluetooth speaker near shipping, and the steady rhythm of scanning and organizing had taken on a new energy. Workers smiled more, greeted each other in passing, asked questions without fear. There were small signs of care everywhere, tools neatly returned to racks, new caution signage printed in both English and Spanish, and a corkboard filled with worker-submitted safety tips, pinned with brightly colored pushpins. Darius moved slowly through the warehouse, taking it in like it was a living, breathing organism that had found its rhythm again. The most remarkable shift wasn't structural, it was cultural. No one waited for permission to fix problems anymore. A temp spotted a loose wire and secured it without being told. A team leader walked the floor with a notepad, asking if anything felt off. Safety wasn't an afterthought or a checklist. It was part of the language now, and at the center of it all stood Marcus. Darius found him near Dock 4, his sleeves rolled as always, clipboard in hand, walking 2 new hires through a hands-on safety demonstration with calm authority. He didn't raise his voice, didn't boast, didn't perform. He just led, clearly, patiently, steadily. When the demonstration ended, Marcus gave each trainee a laminated version of the checklist he'd designed, one that now hung on every zone's bulletin board. Darius waited until they walked off before approaching. "It's different here," he said quietly. Marcus turned, nodded once. "It's better." He hesitated, then added, "Still has a ways to go." Darius smiled at that. "Becoming," he said, echoing Marcus's tone. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small white envelope. No branding, no seal. Inside was a note, handwritten in clean script. "Thank you for caring even when no one noticed." Taped to the bottom was a single silver key. Marcus opened the envelope and read the note silently, then looked up, questioning. "Director of Safety Culture and Development," Darius said. "There's an office waiting for you at HQ. You'd help build what you've already started here, but on a national scale. I'll understand if you'd rather stay on the floor, but the offer's real." Marcus didn't respond right away. He turned the key over in his hand, then slipped it into his back pocket. "I'll think about it," he said simply. Darius nodded. "Good." He started to walk away, but paused, glancing back. "Why do you think I really came back today?" Marcus looked at him, then shrugged. "To remind yourself what leadership looks like." Darius laughed softly, caught off guard by the accuracy. "Something like that," he said. "You have a quiet way of making people better, Marcus. You always did. We just needed to slow down long enough to notice." Marcus didn't beam or break. He nodded again, grounded, composed, unchanged. That was who he was. As Darius stepped back into the sunlight pouring through the warehouse bay doors, he looked out over the floor one last time. The machines moved, the workers moved, but they weren't just fulfilling orders anymore. They were upholding something bigger. One man had shown them what that looked like, not with speeches or rules, but through 1,000 silent actions that had finally found their echo. And in that echo, the company had rediscovered its conscience. The most powerful kind of leadership isn't loud or polished. It's quiet, consistent, and rooted in purpose. Marcus never asked for praise, never chased recognition, and never sought authority. He simply did the right thing when no one else would, not because it was expected, but because he refused to let someone else suffer the way his brother did. His actions proved that real change doesn't always come from the top. It often begins in the margins, with people who care enough to act when others stay silent. Darius's journey from detached executive to hands-on leader revealed an uncomfortable truth. Systems fail when they prioritize performance over people, and the ones holding everything together are usually the ones no one notices. But when someone finally does notice, when one voice validates the silent work of integrity, it can transform a workplace, a culture, and a future. Marcus didn't just fix machines, he repaired trust, accountability, and the human heartbeat of an operation too focused on output to see its own cracks. His story is a reminder that the smallest unseen efforts, when done with care, can shape the biggest outcomes, and that leadership means knowing when to step forward and when to recognize those who already have. If this story moved you, share it with someone who believes in doing the right thing, even when no one's watching. Stories like Marcus's remind us that quiet strength can spark massive change, and that leadership isn't about titles, it's about action. If you want more powerful, real-life inspired stories that shine a light on integrity, justice, and everyday heroes, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We've got more coming, and you won't want to miss a single one.